There is a moment, just before the chaos begins, when the African wild dog pack goes completely still. The hunt is close. The prey has been chosen. Every animal in the pack knows what is about to happen, and yet nothing moves. Nothing charges. Nothing breaks cover. The whole pack holds itself in a kind of electric suspension, muscles coiled, eyes locked forward, breathing in shallow, controlled pulls. And then, from somewhere in the middle of the group, one dog steps forward. Not the largest, not necessarily the most dominant. Just one specific individual, chosen for reasons that at first glance seem almost impossible to explain. This dog moves out ahead of the rest, crossing open ground, closing the distance to the prey, while the others remain behind and wait. It is a moment of extraordinary precision, a moment that looks, to anyone watching, almost rehearsed. If you have ever wondered why that happens, why wild dogs do this, why they send one individual ahead before a coordinated attack, why this behavior appears across packs in Botswana and Zimbabwe and the Kruger and the Okavango with such consistency that it cannot possibly be coincidence, then stay with this. Because the answer reaches into some of the most sophisticated social architecture found anywhere in the animal kingdom. And before we go any further, if you want to understand how nature really works at this level of detail, hit subscribe now. This is the kind of story that takes time to tell properly. Let us start at the beginning, not with the hunt, but with the animal itself. The African wild dog, Lycomon pictus, painted wolf, is one of the most misunderstood predators on the continent. For most of the 20th century, it was persecuted, shot, poisoned, and trapped, viewed by farmers and game managers alike as a wasteful and vicious killer. Its population collapsed from somewhere in the region of 500,000 animals across sub-Saharan Africa to fewer than 7,000 today. It now occupies less than 7% of its historical range and is listed as endangered by the International Union for Conservation of Nature. It is, by any measure, one of Africa's most vulnerable large predators. And yet, in terms of raw hunting success, it is the most effective. Lions succeed in roughly 1 in 5 hunts. Leopards manage something similar. Cheetahs, often celebrated for their speed, close a chase successfully somewhere between 40 and 50% of the time under ideal conditions. African wild dogs, depending on the study and the terrain, succeed in somewhere between 60 and 80% of their hunts. Some researchers working in open savanna habitats have recorded success rates pushing higher still. No other large predator on Earth comes close. The reasons for this extraordinary success rate are numerous and deeply interconnected. Wild dogs are endurance hunters. They run prey down over long distances rather than relying on the ambush and sprint strategy used by most of Africa's big cats. Their legs are long and lean, their lungs are enormous relative to their body size, their paws are built for sustained ground contact, and their cardiovascular systems allow them to maintain pursuit speeds that would exhaust almost any prey animal. An impala or a kudu that outsprints an initial attack from a lion will escape. The same animal outrunning a pack of wild dogs is, in most cases, simply buying itself a few more minutes before the outcome catches up with it. But endurance and fitness are only part of the story. The deeper reason for their success is coordination. And the most dramatic expression of that coordination is the behavior that this story is built around. The sending forward of a single individual before the main attack begins. To understand what is actually happening in that moment, we need to understand how wild dog packs are organized, how they communicate, how decisions get made, and what role each individual plays in the social structure of the group. A typical wild dog pack is not a loose collection of animals moving together out of convenience. It is a highly structured social unit built around a dominant breeding pair, which researchers refer to as the alpha male and alpha female, though the social dynamics are considerably more nuanced than those simple labels suggest. The rest of the pack is composed of subordinate adults, which are typically offspring from previous breeding seasons, and in some cases unrelated immigrants who have been accepted into the group. Pack sizes vary enormously. Small packs may have as few as 4 or 5 adults. Large, stable packs in productive habitats like the Okavango Delta in Botswana can have 20 or more. Every individual in the pack has a role, not in the vague, metaphorical sense in which we sometimes speak about animal societies, but in a concrete, behavioral, observable sense. Some individuals consistently take up flanking positions during a chase. Some are responsible for keeping cohesion in the pack during a long pursuit, Some reliably return to the den or rendezvous site to regurgitate food for pups and babysitting adults. And some, the individuals we are most interested in here, consistently move ahead of the group in the moments before and during the initiation of a hunt. Researchers who have spent years observing individual wild dogs in the field, tracking them with GPS collars, cross-referencing positions with video footage and behavioral logs, have documented this pattern with remarkable consistency. The individual that moves ahead during the pre-attack phase is not selected randomly. It is not simply the dog that happens to be standing at the front of the pack when the hunt begins. It is a specific animal fulfilling a specific function in a system that has been refined by tens of thousands of years of selection pressure. So what exactly is that function? To answer that, we need to think about what the first moments of a hunt actually involve and why they are so critical to everything that follows. Wild dogs hunt primarily in the early morning and late afternoon, when temperatures are low enough to sustain long pursuits. A hunt begins not with a charge, but with a period of observation. The pack will locate prey, often from a considerable distance, and spend time assessing what is available. They are not looking at prey animals in general. They are looking at specific individuals. An animal that is young, old, injured, heavily pregnant, or showing any behavioral signs of compromised fitness will be identified and targeted. This assessment phase can last minutes, or, in some cases, considerably longer. During this time, the pack is almost entirely silent, holding its position, watching. What happens next is where the individual sent ahead becomes critical. Before the main chase begins, before the pack commits to a pursuit that will cost every animal in it significant caloric expenditure, one dog moves out toward the prey. This is not a full attack. It is something more subtle and more purposeful than that. This individual moves at a controlled pace, not sprinting, not charging, but covering ground in a way that begins to apply pressure to the targeted prey animal while leaving enough ambiguity in the approach to generate a response. What the pack needs at this stage is information. A prey animal that appears to be limping may actually be carrying an old healed injury that no longer significantly impairs its running ability. A buffalo calf that looks isolated may have its mother 30 meters away in tall grass. An impala ram that is standing apart from the herd may be doing so because it is healthy and dominant and choosing to position itself between perceived threats and the females it is guarding, which makes it an extremely dangerous animal to chase in the wrong terrain. All of these variables need to be resolved before the pack commits. The individual sent forward is resolving them. By approaching and applying controlled pressure to the target animal, this dog generates the behavioral response that tells the rest of the pack what they need to know. A truly compromised animal will show it under this pressure in ways that a stationary assessment from a distance simply cannot reveal. The asymmetry in its gait will become visible when it moves. Its decision-making, whether to flee toward the herd or away from it, whether to stand its ground or break, will tell the watching pack enormous amounts about its physical and psychological state. And critically, the response of the surrounding herd to this approach tells the pack about the terrain, the escape routes, and the likely trajectory of the chase before a single animal has committed to running at full speed. This is reconnaissance. Active, living reconnaissance conducted by a single individual on behalf of the whole group. The dog performing this function is, in most cases, not the alpha. This is one of the most counterintuitive things about it. In many animal societies, the dominant individual leads from the front in the most literal sense. In lion prides, dominant males often initiate contact with large, dangerous prey like buffalo, using their size and power to make the first physical engagement. In wolf packs, alpha animals often direct and lead the hunt. But in African wild dog societies, the alpha pair's role in the hunt is more about coordination and decision-making than about being the first physical point of contact. The individual sent ahead is more often a mid-ranking adult, frequently a male, and frequently the same individual across multiple hunts in the same pack. Researchers working with collared packs have documented specific dogs fulfilling this forward reconnaissance role in hunt after hunt over observation periods spanning years. These animals develop what appears to be a specialized competence in this role, a combination of behavioral tendency, experience, and what can only be described as an operational comfort with being alone at the forward edge of the group's activity. What makes an individual suited to this role? This is where the science becomes genuinely fascinating. Wild dog personality, and the word is not being used loosely, it is the word behavioral ecologists actually use, varies considerably between individuals. Some animals in a pack are consistently bolder and more exploratory. They approach novel stimuli faster, they recover from startling events more quickly, they initiate more interactions with unfamiliar objects and situations. Others are more cautious and vigilant, better at sustained observation, more reactive to subtle environmental cues. The personality profile of the individual selected for the forward role in pre-attack positioning tends to cluster toward the bold end of this spectrum, but not at the extreme. Animals that are extremely bold, that charge immediately and without adequate assessment, are actually liabilities in a hunt rather than assets. What the forward role requires is controlled boldness, the capacity to move into an exposed and potentially dangerous position without freezing or breaking away prematurely, combined with the discipline to gather information rather than simply acting on it. There is evidence suggesting that this profile is shaped by both genetics and early experience. Wild dogs that grow up in packs, where forward positioning is a regular feature of hunting behavior, show earlier development of approach behaviors in their own juvenility. They are more likely to push to the outer edge of the pack during mobbing behaviors, more likely to be the first to investigate disturbances, more likely to hold a position under pressure during social challenges with other pack members. In other words, the wild dog that ends up performing the forward role on a hunt has, in many cases, been developing the behavioral template for that role since it was a pup. But individual personality is only one half of the equation. The other half is communication. Wild dogs have a communication system of extraordinary sophistication. They use vocalizations that include high-pitched twittering calls which function as contact calls during movement, alarm calls which are structurally distinct from contact calls and carry specific information about threat type and direction, begging calls used by pups and subordinate adults to solicit food, and a range of low-frequency rumbles and growls used during close-contact social interactions. Their scent marking system is equally complex, with both dominant and subordinate animals contributing to a chemical information landscape that communicates identity, reproductive state, direction of travel, and the emotional arousal level of the marking individual at the time of deposit. But the communication that is most directly relevant to the forward positioning behavior is the visual and olfactory communication that occurs during the greeting ceremony. Wild dog greeting ceremonies are among the most intense social interactions in the mammalian world. Before almost every major group activity, including hunts, packs engage in a gathering and greeting ritual in which individuals move rapidly between each other, pressing their muzzles together, vocalizing in the twittering contact call, often touching and licking each other's faces. This ceremony can last anywhere from a few seconds to several minutes, and its intensity scales with the intensity of what is about to happen. Researchers at the Botswana Predator Conservation Trust and the Endangered Wildlife Trust have been analyzing wild dog pre-hunt greeting ceremonies with increasing precision over the past 2 decades. What they have found changes the way we think about how group hunting decisions are made. The greeting ceremony is not simply a motivational warm-up, a way of getting the group excited. It is an information transfer and consensus-building event. During the ceremony, individual dogs are assessing each other's arousal levels, their willingness to participate, their behavioral readiness. A dog that greets intensely, that initiates and sustains contact with multiple other individuals, that vocalizes at a high rate, is signaling its readiness to engage. A dog that is physically present but behaviorally withdrawn, that allows greetings but does not initiate them, is signaling something different. And here is what is particularly relevant to our story. Within the greeting ceremony, there is a pattern of movement and contact that identifies which individual will move forward first. The dog that consistently positions itself at the outer edge of the greeting cluster, that makes contact with the alpha pair and with multiple other individuals in the group, but then begins to orient its body toward the direction of the prey, even before the ceremony has fully resolved. This dog is, through its behavior during the greeting ceremony itself, already taking up its role. The pack reads this. They respond to it. The greeting ceremony is, in part, the mechanism through which the forward individual's role is confirmed and communicated to the whole group. This has profound implications for how we understand decision-making in animal societies. For a long time, the dominant model for understanding collective behavior in social animals was the leader-follower model. One individual, usually the dominant animal, makes a decision. The others follow. This model is intuitively satisfying and maps neatly onto human intuitions about leadership and hierarchy. But it is increasingly clear that in many highly social species, decision-making is distributed rather than centralized. It emerges from the collective behavior of all the individuals in the group, with information flowing laterally between animals, rather than top-down from a single leader. African wild dog pre-hunt behavior is a particularly clean example of this distributed decision-making system. The choice of the forward individual is not a command issued by the alpha. It emerges from the social interaction of the whole group. The greeting ceremony allows the group to assess individual readiness and match role assignment to individual capacity in real time. The result is a system that is both flexible and robust. If the individual that would normally take the forward role is injured or absent, the group can reassign the role through the same social process without missing a beat. And there is more. The forward individual's behavior during the reconnaissance approach feeds information back into the group in real time, adjusting the pack's collective behavior dynamically as the situation develops. As the forward dog approaches the prey, and the prey begins to respond, the watching pack is reading the situation and updating their positions. If the target animal breaks immediately and at full speed in a direction that is favorable for pursuit, the pack launches from their positions in a coordinated wave, with different individuals already moving to cover the most likely escape trajectories. If the target animal shows signs of serious impairment and begins moving slowly, the pack moves forward more deliberately, conserving energy. If the target animal runs into the protection of a herd or toward terrain that makes pursuit dangerous, the pack may hold, regroup, and reset, searching for a better opportunity. None of this adjustment requires explicit communication between pack members. It emerges from each individual reading the same forward situation and applying the same internally held decision rules to what they observe. But those decision rules are calibrated by the shared information environment that the pack has built through years of hunting together, through the greeting ceremony before each hunt, through the physical and chemical communication that flows continuously between individuals. The forward dog is not simply a scout. It is a signal processor, generating the information that the entire group's subsequent behavior depends on. Now let us follow an actual hunt through from this beginning to its conclusion, because the pre-attack forward positioning behavior does not end with the initial approach. It continues to shape the hunt as it unfolds. The sun is low over the floodplains of the Okavango Delta, the light turning the floodwater amber and the papyrus reeds into burning columns. A pack of 11 African wild dogs has been resting through the heat of the day in the thin shade of a stand of leadwood trees. For the past hour, they have been increasingly restless, getting to their feet, moving a short distance, lying down again. The pups, 7 of them born 11 weeks ago, are awake and wrestling in the shadows. Then one adult stands, faces north, and holds absolutely still. Within seconds, other adults are on their feet. The greeting ceremony begins. Bodies press together, muzzles touch. The twittering vocalizations rise into a high-pitched chorus. The pups scatter and then return, infected by the energy. The oldest babysitting female, who will stay behind with the pups, begins to move away from the group as the greeting intensifies. She knows she is not part of what comes next. And there, at the edge of the greeting cluster, orienting his body north, while still in contact with 2 other adults, is the individual we are focused on. A male, 5 years old, lean even by wild dog standards, his coat a high-contrast patchwork of black and golden and white that is as individual as a fingerprint. He has been making hunts with this pack for 4 years. He has fulfilled the forward role more often than any other adult in the group. The greeting ceremony resolves in under 2 minutes. The group begins to move north, and this male is already 3 body lengths ahead. There is a small group of impala, 500 meters away in open floodplain, 8 females, 3 juveniles, 1 adult male. The pack moves toward them at a trot, heads low, not yet committed. At 250 meters, the impala are aware of the dogs. They have stopped grazing and are standing in a loose cluster, facing toward the approaching predators. The pack stops, holds. The forward male continues. He moves at the same controlled pace, covering the distance steadily, not triggering a full flight response, but maintaining enough forward pressure to generate movement and behavioral information from the prey. At 150 meters, the impala ram steps forward, positioning itself between the approaching dog and the females. It stamps one foreleg, it blows. The forward male does not flinch. He continues his approach at the same pace. At 100 meters, the females begin to move. Not running yet, moving nervously, repositioning. And then, in the way that these things happen when you are watching carefully enough, one of the juveniles moves differently from the others. It moves with a very slight but consistent asymmetry in its right hindquarters. It is not dramatic, it is barely visible in the first step, but by the third step it is unmistakable. The forward male reads this. He adjusts his approach angle, shifting to his left, cutting the distance between himself and the juvenile animal. Behind him, the pack is watching. They read his shift. They adjust. The ram blows again, stamps again, takes a step forward. He is healthy, alert, powerful. He is not what they want. The forward male gives him nothing. And then the juvenile breaks. It runs southeast, away from the main group of females, toward a stand of mapa trees on the far side of the floodplain. The forward male accelerates from a standstill to his full running speed in 3 strides. Behind him, the pack erupts. What follows is not a simple straight-line chase. It never is with wild dogs. The pack fans across the terrain, different individuals taking up positions that cut off the most obvious escape routes. 2 animals swing wide to the left, looping around to cover the far side of the mopane stand, where the juvenile is heading. 2 others maintain direct pursuit behind the forward male. The rest scatter across the plain in positions that make no sense if you are watching only the immediate chase, but make complete sense if you are watching the terrain and the animal's likely decision-making under pressure. The juvenile impala is fast. It is running as hard as it can, and for 200 meters the distance between it and the forward male barely closes. But the forward male is not trying to close it yet. He is running at a pace that sustains the direction of the chase and begins to expose the asymmetry in the juvenile's gait more fully. He is still gathering information. He is still processing. At 300 meters, the juvenile's stride begins to shorten on the right side. The asymmetry that was barely visible in a slow, nervous walk is now a measurable limitation in a full sprint. The forward male accelerates. The gap closes in 10 seconds. The juvenile tries to change direction, cutting hard left away from the mopane trees, but it cannot hold the turn cleanly, and the change of direction costs it momentum and costs it ground. The 2 dogs that had swung wide to the left are already there. The hunt ends quickly and without prolonged distress in the way that only highly coordinated predators that have run this particular choreography together hundreds of times, can achieve. The pack is on the kill within seconds of the forward male making contact. There is no hierarchy to the feeding at this point. No alpha waiting while others hold back. Every animal, including the oldest adults and the fastest juveniles, feeds from the same carcass simultaneously, in the extraordinary communal sharing that characterizes wild dog society and that most large predators are entirely incapable of. Within 8 minutes, 2 of the adults break away from the carcass, still chewing, moving rapidly back south toward the leadwood trees where the babysitting female is waiting with the pups. The meat they carry in their stomachs is not for themselves. They will regurgitate it for the pups and for the adult that stayed behind. This sharing, this total community of resource, is the biological foundation on which everything else in wild dog society rests. It is why they can afford to specialize, why one animal can commit itself entirely to the forward reconnaissance role without needing to guarantee its own first access to the kill. The system takes care of its contributors. Now let us pull back from that individual hunt and think about what this behavior costs and what it buys. Because nothing in evolution is free, and nothing as consistent as the forward positioning behavior would persist across a species if its costs exceeded its benefits. The costs are real. The individual at the front of a pre-attack approach is the most exposed animal in the group. It is closest to the prey, which in many contexts includes prey species that fight back. A zebra that kicks can break a wild dog's jaw or shatter a leg bone. A warthog that turns can open an adult wild dog from sternum to flank with a single pass of its tusks. An impala that is healthy enough to run at full speed can simply pull away from a single pursuer, leaving the forward dog spent and the element of surprise gone. And there is another cost that is less obvious but equally significant. The forward individual is the one that the prey animal focuses on. Prey animals under threat from a group of predators direct their fear response and their escape behavior toward the most salient, most proximate, most immediately dangerous stimulus in their environment. In most wild dog hunts, that is the forward dog. This means the forward individual is absorbing the prey's full attentional and behavioral response while the rest of the pack operates, to a significant degree, in the prey's attentional blind spot. This is not accidental. This is the benefit side of the equation. By having one individual absorb the prey's attention, the pack is able to position itself freely without triggering the full vigilance response that a group approach would generate. A herd of impala watching a single approaching dog will orient collectively toward that dog and will, critically, orient away from the dogs that are moving to their sides and behind them. The forward individual is creating the attentional conditions under which the rest of the pack can achieve their flanking positions undetected. This is a fundamental feature of cooperative hunting that requires individual sacrifice for collective benefit. It only works in species where individual sacrifice for collective benefit has a reliable return, where the individual that absorbs the cost can trust that the system will compensate it. In wild dogs, that trust is justified. The individual that absorbs the forward roll cost is fed alongside every other pack member from the kill that its roll made possible. Its pups share equally in the communal regurgitation. Its injuries will trigger care responses from other pack members. Its well-being is the pack's well-being. The biological reason this works goes back to the genetics of wild dog packs. In most wild dog packs, the majority of individuals are closely related. The subordinate adults are typically the offspring of the alpha pair from previous breeding seasons. The pack is, in genetic terms, largely a family unit. This means that an individual that absorbs a cost for the benefit of the pack is, in terms of its inclusive fitness, benefiting versions of its own genes that are carried in the bodies of its packmates. The evolutionary logic of altruism, the logic that explains why an individual would accept costs for the benefit of others, works most powerfully when those others share a significant proportion of the altruistic individual's genes. This is why the radical cooperative behavior of African wild dogs, including the forward positioning role, has been able to evolve and persist. The genetics and the social structure are aligned in a way that makes genuine altruism, not just apparent altruism, biologically sustainable. But there is a complication, and it is one that the best wild dog researchers have been wrestling with for years. Not every forward individual in pre-attack positioning is a close genetic relative of the pack. Some packs contain immigrants, animals that have joined from outside and that are not closely related to the resident members. And some of these immigrant individuals still take up the forward role. In their case, the inclusive fitness argument is weakened. They are not obviously sacrificing for copies of their own genes. What explains their behavior? The answer that is emerging from long-term behavioral studies is that in wild dog societies, the forward role is not simply a biological reflex driven by kin selection. It is also a learned, socially reinforced behavior that individuals adopt because it has direct personal payoffs within the social system of the pack. An individual that consistently and reliably performs the forward role effectively becomes valuable to the pack in a way that is clearly recognized and responded to. These individuals receive priority access to certain resources, show higher rates of affiliation with the dominant pair, are more likely to be groomed and solicited for social interaction, and show lower rates of aggression directed toward them from dominant individuals. In short, performing the forward role well buys you social capital within the pack, and that social capital has concrete fitness consequences. This finding is significant because it suggests that wild dog cooperative hunting behavior is maintained not just by genetics, but by a social reward system, by something that functions, in at minimum a mechanistic sense, like reputation. The concept of reputation in animal societies is controversial and complicated. It requires that individuals be able to track and remember the past behavior of other individuals, that they be able to discriminate between high and low performers, and that their own behavior toward others reflect those assessments. In most invertebrate and many vertebrate species, these cognitive requirements are not met. But in a long-lived, highly social species with individually differentiated pack members and stable long-term relationships, as wild dogs clearly are, the cognitive infrastructure for something like reputation tracking is plausibly available, and the behavioral evidence suggests it is being used. Young wild dogs that are beginning to develop the behavioral profile associated with the forward role, that push forward during greeting ceremonies, that take up outer positions during group movements, that hold their ground under pressure during encounters with prey or competitors, receive measurably different social responses from older pack members than young dogs that do not show these behaviors. They are approached more often, included more reliably in activities, and show lower rates of food contest with older animals. They are being, in the most literal sense, encouraged. This is profoundly interesting because it suggests that wild dog packs are doing something cognitively sophisticated that very few other species have been documented doing. They are differentially reinforcing specific behavioral profiles in younger individuals in a way that shapes the social role those individuals will play when they are adults. They are, in a functionally meaningful sense, training, not consciously, not with any intention we could recognize. But the outcome is the same. Young wild dogs that show the behavioral profile of a forward individual receive social rewards that reinforce that profile. The profile becomes more expressed. By adulthood, it is established. The behavior is socialized as well as selected. This two-pronged system, genetic predisposition combined with social reinforcement, is more robust than either mechanism alone. A pack that loses its most experienced forward individual to injury or death is not left without a replacement. The social reinforcement system has been, in parallel, developing a candidate. The pack's functional continuity is protected by redundancy built into its own developmental system. Let us now move from the behavioral and cognitive aspects of this story to the ecological context, because what wild dogs have developed is not an isolated behavioral quirk. It is a response to specific ecological pressures that no other African predator faces in quite the same way. African wild dogs are, by the standards of Africa's large carnivores, extraordinarily vulnerable to interference. Their kills are stolen with remarkable frequency. Lions will drive dogs off a fresh kill almost every time there is an overlap in range. Spotted hyenas, despite popular mythology about their own hunting abilities, are extremely effective at locating and dispossessing wild dogs. Even African wildcats and black-backed jackals will approach a kill that dogs are still feeding from, taking advantage of the dog's reluctance to direct aggression towards smaller species at a site they want to abandon quickly. This interference predation and kleptoparasitism, the theft of kills, is a chronic cost of being an African wild dog. Studies in the Serengeti ecosystem estimated that wild dogs lost a significant proportion of their kills to lions and hyenas before the packs could finish feeding. In areas where large lion populations overlap extensively with wild dog ranges, this loss can be catastrophic, particularly for small packs trying to provision pups. The wild dog's response to this chronic pressure has been to hunt faster, to finish kills faster, to coordinate so efficiently that the time between the chase ending and the kill being consumed is as short as possible. This is why wild dogs feed simultaneously rather than in a dominance hierarchy. This is why they begin feeding while the prey is still being dispatched. This is why the communal regurgitation for non-hunting pack members happens so quickly after the kill. And this is why the pre-hunt forward positioning behavior is so valuable. Every element of energy that can be saved before the chase, every piece of information about the target that can be gathered before the pack commits, every second of pursuit time that can be cut by accurate pre-hunt assessment, directly reduces the time the pack spends on the kill site. In an ecosystem where staying on a kill too long means losing it to much larger predators, the efficiency gains from coordinated reconnaissance are not luxuries, they are survival tools. This ecological pressure also explains something else about wild dog hunting behavior that is closely related to the forward positioning role: the extraordinary consistency of individual specialization across multiple hunts. Wild dogs do not reassign roles randomly hunt by hunt. The same individuals consistently fulfill the same roles. The forward dog is the forward dog. The flankers are the flankers. The animals that push wide and fast on the closing phase of a chase are the animals that always push wide and fast. This role consistency means that every hunt benefits from the experience and refinement that each specialist has accumulated in their specific function. The forward dog is not learning its role on each individual hunt. It has already internalized the decision rules, the physical adjustments, the micro-behavioral readings that effective forward reconnaissance requires. It has practiced them hundreds of times. The efficiency this creates is hard to overstate. A pack of wild dogs hunting with established role specialists is operating at a fundamentally different level from a pack of equivalent individuals hunting without specialization. The difference is not just in how well they perform each role, it is in how much cognitive load each individual carries during the hunt. When roles are pre-assigned and deeply practiced, the animals do not need to make real-time decisions about where to go or what to do in every moment. They are executing a practiced routine, making only the local adjustments that the immediate situation requires. This frees up cognitive resources that can be devoted entirely to reading the prey, reading the terrain, and reading each other. The result is the kind of seamless, almost preternaturally coordinated hunting behavior that observers repeatedly describe as looking like something that has been planned in advance. It has not been planned, in the human sense of the word. It has been practiced, socialized, and biologically optimized over an evolutionary timescale that dwarfs human civilization. There are populations of African wild dogs where this behavior has been studied with particular care, and among these, the packs of the Okavango Delta in Botswana and the Selous Game Reserve in Tanzania have contributed the most detailed and long-running data sets. In the Okavango, where the terrain includes a mosaic of open floodplain, seasonally flooded channels, dense riverine forest, and mopane scrubland, the forward positioning behavior takes on additional complexity. The forward individual must be able to navigate this terrain while keeping the target animal in front of it, adjusting its approach angle to account for water barriers and vegetation density, and communicating through body language to the following pack, not just the direction of the chase, but the specific terrain challenges that lie ahead. Researchers from the Botswana Predator Conservation Trust fitted individual wild dogs with GPS units that recorded position data at 2-second intervals, allowing them to reconstruct the spatial geometry of hunts with extraordinary precision. What they found was that the forward individual's movement path during the pre-attack approach was geometrically structured. It was not a straight line toward the prey. It was an approach that systematically reduced the prey's angle of optimal escape while keeping the following pack in positions that maximize their ability to respond to any direction the prey might take. In other words, the forward dog was not just approaching the prey, it was solving a spatial problem in real time, positioning itself to maximize the hunt's success probability given the terrain, the prey's behavioral state, and the pack's current configuration. This level of spatial reasoning, applied dynamically during a moving approach to a reacting prey animal, requires cognitive capacities that are substantial by any measure. It requires working spatial memory, the ability to hold and update a map of moving objects in 3 dimensions. It requires predictive modeling, the ability to project where the prey will go, given its current behavior, and the terrain ahead of it. It requires social awareness, the ability to integrate one's own position and role with the positions and roles of multiple other individuals simultaneously. None of these capacities are uniquely human, but their combination in a single behavioral sequence, performed reliably, accurately, and adaptively in real-world hunting conditions, represents a level of cognitive sophistication that was, until relatively recently, assumed to be the exclusive province of primates. The wild dog's brain, for all its non-human architecture, is doing something extraordinary in those pre-attack moments. There is a broader significance to this story that goes beyond wild dog biology and reaches into some of the most fundamental questions about the evolution of cooperation and intelligence. Social complexity and cognitive complexity tend to co-evolve. The more complex the social environment an animal navigates, the greater the cognitive demands placed on each individual within that social environment, and therefore the stronger the selection pressure for enhanced cognitive ability. Wild dogs live in one of the most socially complex environments of any non-primate mammal. Every individual must track the behavioral states, relationship histories, and role assignments of 10 or 20 other individuals simultaneously. It must read subtle behavioral signals from prey animals under pressure. It must navigate terrain while coordinating movement with multiple other moving bodies. It must inhibit its own immediate behavioral impulses, like the impulse to charge immediately toward food, in the service of a complex collective strategy. This is a cognitive environment that selects hard for intelligence. And the behavior we have been examining throughout this story, the forward positioning role with all of its complexity, its social negotiation, its dynamic spatial reasoning, its real-time information processing, is one of the clearest expressions of that intelligence in action. It is worth pausing on something that is easy to miss in a detailed account like this one. The behavior we are describing is being performed by animals that weigh between 20 and 30 kilograms, that have brains roughly 1/6 the size of a human brain, that have never been deliberately trained or shaped by human intervention. Everything they are doing, every layer of coordination, specialization, communication, and cognitive processing has emerged purely from the interaction between their biology, their social environment, and the ecological pressures they face. Nature, given enough time and enough pressure, invents things. The forward positioning behavior of African wild dogs is an invention in this sense. It is a solution to a specific set of problems, crafted not by any individual intelligence, but by the accumulated action of selection on variation across thousands of generations. It works. It works with a precision and reliability that any human engineer would recognize as elegant. And it works because every piece of it, the behavioral specialization, the social reinforcement system, the greeting ceremony communication, the distributed decision-making, the communal resource sharing, fits together into a coherent whole. Remove any piece, and the whole system degrades. This is the characteristic signature of genuinely evolved complexity. Not a collection of independent features that happen to coexist, but an integrated architecture where each element supports and depends on the others. The forward positioning behavior is only possible because wild dogs share food communally. They only share food communally because their genetic relatedness makes inclusive fitness logic work. Their inclusive fitness logic only generates reliable cooperation because the pack structure is stable across years. The pack structure is only stable across years because the social reinforcement system builds and maintains role assignment across generations. The role assignment system only generates the forward individual because the greeting ceremony provides a communication platform for signaling and confirming roles before each hunt. Pull one thread and the fabric loosens. This is why what we are looking at is not a trick or a quirk. It is an architecture, and it is under threat. The African wild dog's 7,000 surviving individuals are distributed across isolated, fragmented populations that are separated from each other by human land use, roads, fencing, and habitat conversion. Genetic exchange between populations has been severely reduced. Some subpopulations have become small enough that the social complexity that drives the behavioral system we have been examining is itself at risk. Small packs, which are the inevitable consequence of population fragmentation, show reduced hunting success rates. They also show reduced behavioral diversity, fewer specialized individuals, less consistent role assignment. The cognitive and social architecture that makes the wild dog the most effective hunter in Africa is not a fixed characteristic of the species. It is an emergent property of intact, fully functional social groups. Damage the social group and you damage the behavior. Damage the behavior and you damage the pack's ability to survive. This means that conservation of the African wild dog is not just a question of protecting enough individual animals from direct killing and habitat loss.